Oh, yeah. What's up, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to episode 36 of the Sailor Jerry podcast. My name is Matt Cawthron. I am still your host. And ladies and gentlemen, today is Thursday, May 19th, 2022. And Sailor Jerry Spiced Rum is still made the old school way, 92 proof, bold and smooth as hell. If you are watching on the YouTube right now, you might notice things looking just a little bit different. I am rocking a handheld Rode microphone. I am sitting in front of what only can be described as confusing artwork against a plain white wall. And ladies and gentlemen, that can only mean one thing. Yes, I am back on the road. And ladies and gentlemen, we are not just anywhere. We are in the upside down. We are in one of the greatest places on the planet after years of not being able to come. The Bronx and myself are back in Australia, ladies and gentlemen. I can't even put into words how good it feels to be back. Still doesn't feel real. We have our first show in Perth, and our second show is in Adelaide. And then I think from there we hit all the big ones, Melbourne, Sydney, all that stuff. But who cares what the exact schedule is? The point is that we are back, ladies and gentlemen. And let me tell you what, the road to get to Australia, it is still a road less traveled. Let's just say that. LAX to Sydney, 15-hour flight, go through customs. Everything was all good. Then we had to go to the domestic terminal, with all the gear. We're putting guitars, everything on the bus, going from terminal to terminal. That's always a nightmare, but who cares? Fuck it. It's part of the process. Just get me to where we need to go, right? So then, boom, our first show was in Perth. So we fly. Basically, Perth is the California of Australia. So the majority of Australia that you might know, Melbourne and Sydney and all that stuff, it's mostly on the East Coast. You know what I'm saying? So we took a 5-hour flight after that from Sydney to Perth. We landed in Perth, and then it was on from there. So I got to say that it does feel amazing to be back in Australia. It does feel great to be podcasting on the road again. And, this is a really cool tour that we're doing out here. We got Chubby and the gang from England opening up all the shows. Plus, we got some local openers from different cities where we're playing. Australia is never at a shortage for great rock and roll, great punk rock. It is a really, really, really amazing happening island. And I'm glad to be back. And it's kind of crazy because, coming full circle a little bit, before the pandemic started, we were supposed to go to Australia for the Download Festival. And then all of a sudden, bands started dropping off. People were getting sick, and there was rumors, and everything was going around the world. And then slowly but surely, it was like, okay, the headliners are dropping off this thing. It's not going to happen. And that was the official start, to the 2-year lockdown, basically, on the music industry. And so it's only fitting that, our kind of really big first international trip / tour back is in Australia. It's always been a great place for us to play, an amazing place to visit. So obviously, I've said it a zillion times by now, I'm happy to be here. Really, really cool feeling. And, that feeling of gratitude, excitement is transferable to this interview and this episode as well, because this is this is one person that I've always wanted to interview, one person I've always wanted to talk about music with. If you're into punk rock like I am, he is a legendary figure. And it was just a real pleasure to talk to him. So without further ado, it's time for episode 36. Ving is the unapologetic frontman for one of the greatest punk rock bands of all time, Fear. In this episode, we look back at Lee's incredible life as a musician, actor, and punk provocateur. From the band's legendary performance on Saturday Night Live to cult film classics Dudes, Clue, and of course, the decline of Western civilization. Plus, lots of stories from the punk rock glory days, crazy Hollywood nights, and everything in between. We even got the scoop on the new Fear record. This interview is awesome. Ving is a legend. So sit back, relax, pour yourself some Sailor Jerry, and let's go. Hey, there we go.
How you doing, Matt?
I'm good, Lee. How are you, man?
Finer than frog hair, brother.
Yeah, man. It's awesome. Awesome to talk to you, man. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Oh, sure, man. Thank you for being interested. Bless you.
Of course, man. Of course. How's your week going? What are you up to currently?
My ears and all kinds of bric-a-brac, wasted time, business as usual, and other things.
Right on, man. Right on. Well, we really appreciate you taking the time to join us here on the Sailor Jerry podcast. This is a big one for me. I'm a huge fan, so thank you very much for taking the time.
Down on the boulevard, they take it hard. Dip, 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 dip. Down at the Golden Cup, they bring the young ones up under the neon sign. Who cares? Nobody gets it for nothing. Nobody gets it for free.
You sound like an angel still. Come on now.
Oh, thank you.
Obviously, there's a lot to get into, but before we dive into the band and all that, I wanted to give our listeners maybe a little background on where you came from and how you became you. So you were born in Philly, right?
That's right.
Awesome. And what were your parents like? Did they listen to music at all?
They were busy with world affairs and trying to survive in a Philadelphia neighborhood during those years that were sort of like the world was strife torn at that point still. And then as time went on, they moved out to the suburbs, and his employment got more significant, and we were doing a little better. And then we moved to another neighborhood, and I went to Abington High School.
What was your world like in high school? Like, what kind of kid were you?
I was a springboard diver in the diving competition at a swim meet. I was the representative of the high school, usually, and I did quite a bit of winning there. And we'd go and do some like tri-state events and East Coast events, what have you. I was in Villanova for a couple of years, and then the Vietnam War was what I was involved in for a couple of years there. But thank the good Lord, I didn't get sent to that. I got inducted and trained, but spent my 2 years stateside.
Where were you stationed?
Georgia, Fort Knox, Kentucky, South Carolina, Baltimore, Maryland, stuff like that.
Awesome. One thing I wanted to ask you, and one thing that I think about a lot these days with everything going on in the world, is you grew up in a very tumultuous time. You had the Vietnam War, you had the Kennedy assassination, you had civil rights, you had all these things happening. How do you compare the crazy times of the 60s to the times that are happening now? Because I feel like people are saying that the world is going to end, but it feels almost like it was crazier back then.
Yeah, it's hard to tell because I think we were being spoon-fed some information that was going to be enough to keep us quiet. I think we're probably getting a little more information now, but it's sort of hard to tell which was worse.
Yeah, and then so after your time in the army, you go back to Philly and you decide to get more serious about music, right?
Yes,
What did that entail? What was that all about?
I joined a band called Sweet Stave Chain, and they were a blues band. I was the harp player, and we played shows at the Electric Factory in Philadelphia regularly, in the Second Fret, and along with some other places. And we went to New York to play, and we were busy negotiating, investigating what about a record deal for us to put out an album. But that was such an arduous task that it took so long that the band just fell apart. And I moved to New York. And I joined a band called Daybreak. And that band had Bruce Ditmas, Michael Brecker, myself. The other singer was Countess Felder. She and I did the vocals. Eugene Busner was a bass player. Bruce Ditmas was the drummer. Michael Brecker was not a joined member, but he was in the neighborhood, and he would stop by, and was also a Philadelphian, so I knew him from Philadelphia. He would come and sit in with Sweet Stave Chain in the Philly gigs. So I knew him by the time I moved to New York, and he was a saxophone all-star. And we also did not get a record deal. And I was working with Michael Lang and Marvin Grafton, and they had a management company. We were trying to put something together with that. None of that worked. And a couple of years later, I moved to California.
Nice. Did you, or are you classically trained musically, or did you go to school for it at all? Or how did you kind of learn? Because I read that you went to school for voice, for guitar, for all these things, and you have such a bluesy classic voice. Where did that kind of come from?
It came from my being a blues fan.
Yeah.
And my being the lead singer in Sweet Stave Chain, which was a bona fide blues band. And
Gotcha.
we'd do everybody's stuff, including our own. And that's where that came from. And I did study piano. I studied guitar with different teachers for years. I studied harmonica with a very good harmonica player from Philadelphia, whose name escapes me at the moment. And so there was a lot coming to the gigs with me.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like it. It's really cool to hear about, because I think a lot of people, even if they just know Fear, they know about the musicality of the band, but your specific musicality is really deep, and it's really, really interesting, especially the blues end of it. I just think it brings so much to Fear when the band actually comes together,
Right.
So you go out to LA, you fly out to LA in, what is that, like probably 77, something like that?
Maybe a little bit earlier than that,
okay.
Maybe a few years earlier than that. And it was a little more like a movie that you would see at this time of that time. Me in a recently painted with a paintbrush orange Volkswagen bus, and my wife driving to Los Angeles
Oh, you drove.
from New York
Oh, yeah.
in a Volkswagen bus that was more significantly looking zippy from my paint job with a paintbrush than it was in fact. And we're just really fortunate that we made it.
Yeah, absolutely. That New York to LA drive is no joke. I'm sure you've done it multiple times since then, but
Yes.
but in the Volkswagen with the orange paint job for the
Yeah, not
initial
knowing how many
voyage.
more miles you were going to get. It's great to be young and more adventurous.
So what was your first impression of the West Coast? Like when you got out there, when you got settled in a little bit, you had a chance to kind of take things in. What did you think about it?
Well, I was looking for some pre-existing unit of some kind to join to hopefully skip some time so we could get right down to business, start making a record. But that process was not as forthcoming as I either expected or saw, and so we wound up different portions of these units would wind up playing bars, things like that, just to keep money on the table,
Mm-hmm.
food. And I would, from time to time, go and audition for people that were looking for a singer, see if I was going to find a hot band that just happened to need a singer or something like that. But it wound up being, the process wound up being, you find players who can do the job when it comes to being in the studio, and you get busy writing material before you get into that studio, so that you're not only presenting your musicality, your musicianship, but also the material. And all of those processes were slow. There was lots of players out here prior the time prior to, where all the bands from California had become successful, Jefferson Airplane and all that. That was It was not happening as hand over fist as it had been. And now we were in the 70s, and there was going to be a lot of interpretation and misinterpretation of what people want.
Yeah,
So it
yeah,
was a
yeah.
lot of experimentation and taking gigs that you otherwise would not have taken just to pay your rent.
Yeah, it was kind of like a time, I imagine, especially when towards the end of the 70s, when, especially in the music industry, there might have been like a little bit of a lull professionally to see what's going to hit next, to see what's happening next, to see what the 80s are going to bring. And in the meantime, you're just out there trying to make some money, trying to play music, trying to get a band together. How did, out of all of that, how did punk rock come into your life? How did Fear get started?
It was a time a little past, thinking everything was about to happen, like still in the 70s. And in the early 80s, the punk rock thing came alive. So I found good players who were interested in that point of view and to see what that could bring. And we dug in, started playing, became friends with Brendan Mullen at the Mask, and an emigre from England, a Londonite, I believe. And I began to meet other people on the scene, and there became Brendan was putting on shows here and there, as were some of the other clubs taking this new thing, because the old thing had sort of faded out and business going down the drain. So they were all looking for something new,
Yeah.
which fit right in to this, because I hired good players, and but you had to find a place that could host a punk rock gig where people understood it.
Yeah.
It had its own difficulties.
Yeah, for sure. And Fear has always been they've always stood out, musically speaking, in pretty much every way, really, but specifically talking about the musicality of the band. And your vocal style is pretty much a sum of your experience, bluesy, aggressive. uh did Fear initially, the sound of the band, did it turn out the way you envisioned it?
Yes, because I had envisioned it so closely. I think all the parts were important and well known to me. So when I brought the song to the band, I didn't have to be so tense, hoping that it would work out, because I knew that if it didn't work out, if it wasn't happening the way I wanted it to, given that these were good players, that I would just go somewhere else.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to adapt to the ability of the players. I wanted the players and their ability to adapt to this thing that I heard. And
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to find players who could do that. And it worked out.
Absolutely. When you were writing the songs that would make up the first record, did you feel like you were in some sort of like zone? Did you feel like something special was happening?
Yes, I knew that the things that everyone had been used to, what they were starting to call old wave, uh, was no longer the rule of thumb. So we wanted to step outside of those boundaries anyway. And so we were able to put on good shows. Brendan put us on. We were a trio when we started, and
Really?
those shows went really well. The kids liked it. They started throwing each other around, and I knew that was a good sign.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about 1981, because that's a huge year for the band. Starting off with Decline of Western Civilization, of course, groundbreaking film by Penelope Spheris, which ultimately led to you guys signing to Slash Records. What can you tell me about that time and that filming process of Decline?
It was great. I think Penelope tried to adhere to whatever rules and regulations were happening on that music scene at the time, and she came to film us at a couple of different places. I wasn't sure where that was going to lead to, but by the time she was ready to sit down and start editing, she had good footage of us, and it came out really well, I thought, and it was a gigantic help to have that going around the world in movie theaters while you're attempting to put this band on the map in these little clubs.
Yeah, absolutely. It's of course, it's an amazing film. Everyone out there, if you haven't seen it, you have to go watch it. There was a little bit of, a couple rumored things here and there that some of the scenes in the film were kind of embellished for acting purposes, some of the Black Flag stuff, some of the different scenes. Did you ever get any sort of sense from Penelope to like play up what you guys were doing or anything like that? Or was it as raw and as real as it transferred for the audience?
It was more like what you just said. She just flipped the switch, say go.
Yeah.
It wasn't. There wasn't a an Encyclopedia Britannica of rules and regulations and things that she felt needed to be present in order for all of us to have success at this. Wasn't like that at all. She just said, "Okay, go ahead. Hello, you hear it up there? Yeah, yeah. Oh, okay, well, go ahead." That was about the length and breadth of the pep talks that we'd get before. It had nothing to do with anything. It's just like, here were bands that were of a specific genre because they were interested in it, and so it worked out pretty well. And we
Awesome.
started playing up in San Francisco for Dirksen, and we did really well there. The place was packed out the first time we played the Mabuhay, so that worked out good for us. And then we'd get in the van and drive to New York and play. There's a club on 42nd Street, that name escapes me, that had always been a music business room, but now they were having punk rock on a couple of nights. So we would get them to have us on that time. And then we'd go to Boston, and we were in Texas, Philadelphia, Baltimore. I think we got to Florida a couple times. So we were getting pretty good exposure.
Yeah, you were playing, you were touring, you were doing it.
Yeah. Then we got on Saturday Night Live. We became friends with John Belushi, may he rest in peace. And he got us on the show. Shortly thereafter, we started getting invitations from people all around the world about can we come and perform. So that was incredible. And we started doing way better.
Yeah, I can imagine. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about SNL, of course. It is one of the I would say visual pillars of punk rock, that performance. It's absolutely legendary. And there's been so much said about it. Obviously everyone knows, in the audience you had Ian MacKaye of Minor Threat, you had Harley and John from Cro-Mags, John Brandon, A Negative Approach, a whole nother wave of punk rockers involved in the madness. And there's been a lot said from those guys about what it was like um, to be in the audience. But what was it like for you in that moment when it was actually happening?
It was just incredible. It was an unbelievably great opportunity that we were attempting to take advantage of while not wanting to totally dispose of our irreverent attitude and choices of things to do and say. But I realized it was a coast to coast world broadcast television show. I mean, you just can't go around saying all the words that we all know so well and still take part in this thing. And so it had to be adjusted enough to stay on the show and play the two segments that we were scheduled to play, which we got to play. So it apparently worked. And it seemed like half the show they just loved us. John was ecstatic. Some of the other people too, Michael O'Donoghue, and I think some of the others may not have been so happy, but not wanting to, cause trouble, they sort of went along with it. So we got away with murder in one way of thinking, and brought the band to the attention of lots of people we'd otherwise not have had the opportunity to do.
Yeah, that's so amazing. And you really can't watch that performance without smiling. And I think if you do watch that performance and you don't smile, there's something really, really wrong with you, because
That's right.
It's absolutely
And it was at a time
amazing.
when they were having the old rehash bands from the 70s, and just didn't seem like music was the thing that was kicking the show in the butt at that time, in a good way, I mean. But I believe that after we were on, that became something to do, another conceivable go-to kind of musical guest that might do the show some good as well. And I think that, without blowing our own horn, I think that our appearance on the show did something for their viewership. It expanded.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. How did you meet John Belushi? And what was he really like?
Uh, I think I had heard that he was a fan of ours. What he was like was a very intelligent gentleman, very creative, very funny fellow, really nice guy. And so he was completely instrumental in getting us on the show. If it had gone really south because the things were too disparate to be joined on one show, I think it would have given him a good chuckle. He would have thought that was funny. But it worked out so that although the thing was vastly different than anything they'd ever had before as a musical artist, musical guest, the audience loved it. They went crazy for it. So it was a great experience and an incredible opportunity.
Yeah, it really, really was something, a very, very special moment in music history, if you ask me. And that kind of leads us into, so you have three amazing moments. You have the movie, you have Slash Records, which at the time was the label, I mean, it was the coolest label. You
Right.
have
It was the only
SNL.
punk rock label I can think of in this country at that time. I know there was a couple of others, but I'd never heard of them.
Yeah, Slash was really it. And they were super diverse too. They had X, they had Los Lobos, they had all, they had a whole bunch of cool things happening.
Right.
And that leads to, Fear the record. So let's talk about that record, because it's definitely one of the greatest punk rock records of all time, and one of my personal favorites. But the thing I love, of course, the thing I love about the record is the sound, the musicianship, obviously the lyrics, I don't think anyone ever heard a punk rock record sound so tight before. There was even like a rumor that Spit Sticks was a drum machine, and that that the sound was so tight because it wasn't even real. These guys couldn't even play that way. So recorded at Sound City, of course, in December of 81, released May 16th, 1982 is what I see here. Tell me about recording that
Operator, please connect me to 1982. I need to find way back there what I listened to. Sorry.
God damn, you sound amazing. What can you tell me about recording that record?
Gary Lubo, a friend of Durf's, happened to be a engineer, in-house engineer at the studio. So he sort of understood what it was we were trying to get at. And he was our recordist. And between us, we were able to get what we were looking for a lot better. Other people would get in the studio and they just do whatever the guy behind the bench told them. But we weren't that way. We had a plan, and Gary, God bless him, understood it. And so we were able to make this great record. And it came out and it kicked ass over virtually everything else. Maybe just everything else, period. And it introduced us. And we did a second record there too. It was a great big studio, multi-track recording studio.
Yeah.
On the cutting edge of recording science itself at the time. And because Durf's friend was a recordist at that studio, we were able to get in there, and he understood what we were looking for and was able to get it on tape for us. And it worked out.
What do you remember about tracking vocals for that record?
It was great. We're in this great studio, great microphones, great recording. And I'm finally singing something that the recordist didn't record so low that you couldn't fucking hear it. Excuse that word. So it was, yes, it was a great moment.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And, I wanted to talk to you for a second about lyrics, because lyrically speaking, Fear has always been top tier to me. It's smart, it's funny, it's political, it's antagonistic, it's original above all else. So what is your lyrical process like? And lyrically speaking, like, what makes a great song to you?
When the lyrics refer to reality in some way, and that if you're singing about a problematic situation that you believe you've identified, or maybe everyone should have identified, those are the great moments. If you're able to turn words in a way that people who otherwise wouldn't pay attention would think to themselves, whether they'd admit it or not, yeah, man, yeah, that's right. Shit, wish I'd have thought of that. Kind of.
Yeah.
It was that kind of idea. I didn't think lyrics were something just to fit the rhythm. They were there to convey messages. I mean, look at William Shakespeare.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you have Fear is one of those bands where when you go see Fear live, everybody's singing along and everybody knows every word, because it really is, something that is such a huge part of the band. I mean, the lyrics are just incredible on every record, So I wanted to ask you about that because I've always enjoyed the lyrics that you write. And I was just curious about your process when it came to writing.
Well, thank you. And I enjoy getting the message across, and I enjoy stating things in a way that others don't, or maybe are afraid to. The recorded music industry had become tired.
Yeah.
It needed something to kick it in the ass, wake it up, get it to talk about reality, and maybe get it to hopefully have a solution to anything at all. So borrowing from that and trying to include that made us vastly different than people who were sound asleep while they were writing and sound asleep while they were singing.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. The record as a debut is it's flawless, man. It really is. I think it's a perfect record, and it really set the tone for the band and for everything to everyone to finally have a record of what they'd seen in the documentary on Saturday Night Live. You know, if they were lucky on tour to actually have that debut record out that people could listen to and that you were really, really proud of. What was that feeling like at that time for the band?
It was great. It was great. And may not have been something that everyone noticed, that people in general were noticing, but I was noticing that do this, do that, and then do a couple other things, and then try this and try that. And a lot of that was working really well and was presenting things in a way that people had not heard before, with great attention and great reckless abandon all at the same time.
Yes, absolutely. And so after the record, you know, you got More Beer, 1985, which, you know, another classic. Have Another Beer with Fear, 1995. As the band's going on, you know, I wanted to talk to you for a second about playing live, because Fear Live has always been like a measuring stick for how punk or brave you think you really are, because there are no posers at a Fear show. You got to keep your head on a swivel. I've seen you guys a bunch of times, and one thing that comes to mind was in the early 2000s at Safari Sam's when Mondo was on bass, and you guys were unbelievable that night, and it was complete chaos. And it's just always been the perfect extension of the band. And so I was just curious, when it comes to playing live, like, has it always been a goal to be dangerous and to be just a little bit crazier than everybody else?
I think it was less of an aspiration to want to be more outside the box than it was we just are outside the box.
Yeah.
You already paid to get in, man. Now jump up and down, or we'll come out there and kick you in the ass. It's a little more like that. That's become a general modern musical direction, you might say.
Yeah, but there's no one that does it quite like Fear. You know what I mean? Like to this day, you know,
and many people still don't recognize it as a viable thing to do. You know, to be outside the limits and outside the law and the rules and regulations and all like that. But we just found ourselves in that place and relished it. You know, we would expand it, add to it.
Yeah, one of the things that I really love about Fear is I think, you know, there was a lot of violence that came into the scene. There was a lot of knuckleheads coming from Orange County. There was a lot of people coming from this place and that place, and the scene got kind of crazy for a while. But I always saw Fear as a band that just kind of like, whoever shows up, shows up. We're just going to play music and let it happen, you know? So I think to a certain extent, you know, Fear to me was almost like kind of pro knucklehead.
Well, it was more forgiving than other groups might have been that frequented places where you can hear new music. And we wanted to make our choices be in addition to greatly played and conceived of music, you know, whether or not we wanted people to realize that while they were hearing it or not. We just wanted that to be the fact. And I think that was very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. What if you had to, you know, put your finger on a couple things, what would you say, what do you think separates Fear from other bands?
It's that we were more interested in the music and having the music be powerful in any number of different ways than we were, you know, what we were wearing or pretty much what we were saying, because that was already in the vein of where we might have wanted it to be. And so we weren't really thinking about it. It was just coming out that way. And it seemed to be working in high places with powerful individuals like John Belushi, and the benefits that would come from assistance from people like him, that powerful, and us able to use it, to use the opportunity to reach as many people with good musicianship and good material and a good performing attitude, sometimes hilarious. It all seemed to work quite well.
Yeah, it really was like a perfect combination of all the elements. And you realize how rare that is in the music industry, for that all to fire kind of at one time, for a band to be coming into its own, to get the opportunities that you guys got, and to have the live show be what it was. It really just created something that was just super unique. And in a genre of a bunch of unique bands, to have your band stand out above all the others is really, really something special.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right on, Lee. So let's transition a little bit into your acting career, because I got to talk to you about it, because it is not just as legendary as your music career, but it's still amazing. So you start in the early 80s, you're in Flashdance. Of course, there's Dudes with Flea in it. But far and away, my favorite role and movie that I've seen you in is as Mr. Body in the movie Clue.
Yes.
Your character, I always thought this was so funny, because it's so like classic you and classic Fear. Your character, Mr. Body, in the movie is accused of blackmailing other guests in the house because they are quote unquote un-American.
Right. And I've had this incredibly long history of admiring the panache of the criminal element. And so to get those very straight opportunities to let some of that leak out, and especially in the case of Mr. Body, who was a stone criminal in his real life, whatever that was. And so it worked out very cool.
So when did you kind of get into acting? How did that kind of start clicking for you? And what did you love about it?
Penelope's movie was very useful. I think a lot of people responded to what I was able to do in the decline, and wanted to see if they could transfer that to the screen. So as Fear actually did increase my attendance at audition-like meetings, reading for parts and that sort of thing. And I really liked it, and I enjoy acting, and I'm good at it. So it's it's something that I was happy to see take a foothold and bring some power to the music business, instead of the music business bringing some power to the movie business. In my case,
it's always felt like musicians becoming actors is a natural progression of art. But for some reason, I never trust actors that become musicians, because you just don't know if they're acting the part or not. Do you think there's any truth to that?
I think there may be some cases that qualify for that description. There may be a number of people who are actors who also are able to get music across, but I think that's far fewer than people know.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any interesting roles that you tried out for that you didn't get?
Yeah, there must be a dozen or so. And when you're tending bar to keep food on the table for you and your family, every one of them fits that description. You con yourself into, I would have loved to play that part.
Where did you tend bar at?
I was bartender at Dante's Jazz Cafe on Lancashire.
Really?
For a bunch of years. Yes.
Was that like 90s, or when was that?
80s.
80s.
Yeah. Late 70s, early 80s. And I had been a bartender at Slug's Jazz Cafe, another jazz bar in New York City on 3rd Street between B and C, before I moved to California.
Awesome, Lee. I appreciate your time. I don't have too many more questions for you. I did want to ask, what are some of your, and it can either be from the punk rock heyday or up to now, or when you were a kid, but what are some bands that you love? tried and true that you're just a fan of?
I like the band, Robbie Robertson,
Yeah, hell yeah.
Levon Helm, right?
Oh yeah, he's a man. R.I.P. If you had to pick between the Stones or the Beatles, who would you pick?
I picked them both.
Oh,
I
you down the middle, huh?
I I just like people who are skilled musically. Stones are a great performing band, great attitude, great rhythm section sound. The blues bands, though,
Yeah,
Charlie Musselwhite and
yeah.
Paul Butterfield and Little Walter, all of that. The whole Chicago scene, and a bunch of the stuff on the California scene. I like all of it. And there's only 12 notes, as people are fond of saying. So, and I'd been studying guitar all my life. I started when I was like 10. So it's been very rewarding and
Yeah.
fulfilling.
Awesome. Yeah, I know, from me personally, you are definitely one of my favorite frontmen because of, obviously, first of all, your voice, second of all, your attitude. Um, what do you think makes a good frontman or front woman?
Well, it doesn't hurt if you're able to sing, if you have a good voice and you know what to do with it. And if you look for things that maybe make you sound slightly different than everybody else that you hear sing, the things you need to do in order to present yourself in the right way are prodigious. There's lots of them. And it all looks good on you if you roll your sleeves up, dig in and get it going. And then, branch out and grow out from there to bring your own vocal way of doing things to the table.
Awesome. What's up with the new Fear record? Is there new music coming out?
There's new music in the can. We're wondering which of it to do. And we're just about to settle in to start looking for the 12 or 14 tunes we'll make another record with. But there's a bunch of tunes.
Who's playing?
At this point, it would be me, Spit, Eric Razzo, and our bass player, Jeff Thailander.
We're looking forward to the new music, man. I mean, that's gonna be awesome. And of course, you guys are out playing shows and everything too. So, the band is still very active. How do you feel? Like, are you still enjoying playing music, writing music?
Yes.
Love that. Absolutely. I love that because it's like, I think from one musician to another, there's so much respect for people who dedicate their life to it, and it's like, I just think that, someone like you is just an absolute treasure to everything that we believe in, and that, music is it's a sacred thing, man. So I really appreciate the dedication of a person like you, of the whole band, just to continue to love and create and love what you do, and just put music out there for everybody to enjoy. It's just a blessing, man. It's a beautiful thing.
Thank you for saying that, brother. I appreciate it very much.
Absolutely, Lee. Okay, a couple more questions and then we're out of here. This is the Sailor Jerry podcast, and I don't know if you know who Norman Sailor Jerry Collins was, but he was a Navy guy and one of the godfathers of traditional tattooing. So I got to ask you, do you have any tattoos, and how do you feel about tattoos?
I have tattoos, and I enjoy. When I got them, I enjoyed them. I still like the fact that I have them.
Do you have a band tattoo? Do you have a Fear tattoo?
Yeah, of course.
Yes, absolutely. All right, last question here, Lee. If I had to ask you, what do you think the meaning of life is, how would you answer that?
It's too disparate and manifold of a subject to cover in a few words. It's the joy of life, interacting, and with music, you interact on a much deeper level. Not just words, but all the emotions and other feelings that can be brought with sound, if done in the right way. So, yeah, I'm stoked and happy to be involved in it, in music.
Thank you very much for your time, Lee. Thank you for being on the Sailor Jerry podcast. Looking forward to the new record. Looking forward to the next time we cross paths. Thank you for doing everything that you do.
Thank you for your time, brother, and for your interest. And I look forward to speaking to you again.
All right. Peace.
Peace. Take care, brother.
Oh, yeah. That's a wrap on episode 36 of the Sailor Jerry podcast. As always, huge amounts of respect and gratitude to our amazing guest, the one and only Lee Ving. Ladies and gentlemen, what a human being that is. Lee Ving, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate you, man. It was really, really cool getting to talk with you about music and about your life. So thank you very much for your time. You can follow Lee Ving at Lee Ving of Fear. You can follow Fear. The band's all over the internet, just like everybody else is. So I trust the smarts of the Sailor Jerry podcast viewer to be able to figure that out. But keep your ear to the ground because there is a new Fear record coming out. Of course, while you are tooling around on the internet, give the podcast a like, give the podcast a follow, give the podcast a subscribe, leave a comment in the YouTube, leave a comment on Sailor Jerry's Instagram page. It all helps, ladies and gentlemen. It really, really does. Thanks everyone for the support. You can follow me at 213MatMan. Of course, follow Sailor Jerry at Sailor Jerry. And do not forget that Sailor Jerry Spiced Rum is still made the old school way. 92 proof, bold and smooth as hell. We'll see you in 14 days. Adios from Australia. Peace.